When we typically think of things that are really strong and rugged, we might picture giant lumberjacks like the legendary Paul Bunyan, or perhaps big, heavy trucks loaded down with giant boulders at a rock quarry. In the world of electronics connectors, strong and rugged has likewise traditionally meant large, heavy, and bulky. But many applications in harsh environments need to be small and lightweight. Thankfully, there are exciting new advancements in rugged connector solutions that are rugged without being bulky. So stick around to learn more. Welcome to Tech Chat, sponsored by Mouser Electronics, where we chat with engineering experts about the latest technical innovations that are shaping and reshaping our world. Today on Tech Chat, we welcome Peter Swift. Peter has a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering and is currently a Product Marketing Director at Amphenol Communication Solutions. Welcome to Tech Chat, Peter.
Thank you very much, Dale. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, with that, let's jump into your presentation.
Sure. Okay, so I guess one of the first things to outline are what exactly are rugged or harsh environments, and because that's kind of what drives the need for these types of connectors. And I guess that can be driven down to a number of different types of environments. One of which is, anywhere you're going to see any kind of dust or particulate matter in the environment that the connector is being used in, industrial gases and fluxes. You could see waters, different kinds of fluids, submersion applications, such as shown in the screen here, where you've got irrigation happening in a horticulture environment. Any environments where you might see shock, vibration, or impact, such as in some sort of a factory setting or any other kind of industrial setting. Also areas where you can see different kinds of electrical conditions that would introduce noise into delicate and sensitive electronic circuits or data links. So anywhere you've got motors or anything like that that's generating electrical noise, you want to have protection as well, electrical protection. And then, of course, there's always rodents and vermin and insects and things that will always get into anything that they can eat. And there's a good picture of a connector that didn't fare too well from a mouse or a rat or something. And then any environments where you've got excessive heat and or cold. So harsh environment connectors are really designed to be used in settings where a normal typical connector really isn't suitable because it wouldn't survive.
So we see these harsh environments, Peter. Now, the title of your presentation is Rugged Interconnect Solutions. Can you define for us a rugged connector?
Sure, absolutely. Typically, we talk about a harsh environment and then a ruggedized solution to be used within that particular harsh environment. But, anything that makes a connector ruggedized is anything that adds features or design elements that really help protect the connector, as well as the equipment that it's mounted on. And if we look at standard connectors, there's an example of a standard modular jack, and you can see that it's made out of stamped sheet metal with plastic and insulator. It's not sealed or anything. And on the right is a ruggedized version of the modular jack. Now, one of the things you see, I'm dropping a weight on the connector. A standard connector is not typically going to stand up well to shock or vibration or impact, which is perfectly fine in an office environment. But a ruggedized connector is going to be not impervious, but it's going to be extremely resistant to shock and vibration. I mean, if you hit anything hard enough, you can break it. But these connectors have die-cast shells, zinc die-cast shells, and they're very, very rugged in the way they're mounted and sealed. So they're very, very resistant to mechanical damage. Ruggedized connectors typically can be used to help seal against incursion from water. So on the left here, you see a standard USB connector. It's not sealed. On the right is a ruggedized version of a USB connector. And if you take a look at this diagram of the connector mounted in a box, the yellow box there represents the enclosure that it's mounted in, and the green line is the printed circuit board. If it gets subjected to water, the standard connector is going to let that water right through, and it's going to get into your equipment, whereas the ruggedized connector is not. It's perfectly sealed, IP67, IP68. It's going to prevent any kind of water from getting through the connector and into your equipment. And then another type of ruggedization is filtering out unwanted electrical noise. So if you take a look at an environment where there's a lot of EMI or electromagnetic interference coming along, and you put a connector in there that is conducting signals from the outside to the inside of your equipment, or the other way, if there's no protection for that signal, you're going to transmit that EMI right through into your box or out into the environment. So we do have what are called filtered connectors, and this is another form of ruggedization. In this case, it's not a sealed connector, but it does have embedded capacitive elements which provide filtering for any kind of EMI. So EMI that's trying to get into your box will be filtered to ground by this connector, and you get a clean signal out the other end.
I have to admit that if I was asked to make a list of ruggedized features for harsh environments, EMI probably would have slipped my mind, but I guess it's an obvious challenge once you mention it.
It is, yeah, absolutely. I mean, people think about harsh environments as being typically temperature or mechanical, environmental, that kind of thing. But the electrical environment is a very, very important aspect of ruggedizing a connector as well. And we can actually have sealed versions of the filter connectors as well.
And with the continuing growth in high frequency and wireless RF signals, this is probably only getting more common and worse.
Absolutely, yeah. And I've shown a D-sub connector here, but we also have filtered terminal blocks, and filtering can be put into other types of connectors as well. Even modular jacks have filtering options available to them.
For our system designers in the audience that are trying to determine whether or not they might actually need a rugged I/O connector, what are some questions they should be considering in their analysis?
Great question. I mean, where are you going to need a ruggedized I/O connector? Anytime you've got a harsh environment, a physical environment where you've got any kind of moisture or temperature excursions that you need to protect your equipment from, so extra protection from the environment. There are going to be conditions that perhaps are just more harsh than typical commercial office environment applications. And this could be factories, warehouses, even in vehicles, other transportation applications, military applications, things like that, outdoor applications, which isn't necessarily rain, snow, humidity, or higher temperatures, but it's going to be other types of environmental stress. And then any time where the cost of failure is high. So you're going to have high reliability applications where you just need to add that extra level of insurance that your connector is not going to be a failure point in the equipment. It's going to make sure that your equipment survives whatever's thrown at it.
And I would think that cost of failure can also include the cost of getting to something and repairing it. Maybe the downtime's not a big problem for a while, but the fact that you have to go to a remote location to repair it, or it's a difficult place in your factory to get to, for example.
That's an excellent point. It's, I think of that as sort of total applied cost of the application. It not only goes from your cost of your components and materials when you're building the part and the cost of assembly, but also, as you said, to the costs associated with maintaining a product in the field. Even if you've got high reliability, it could be very high cost to actually go out and perform those repairs, depending on where the product is and, how critical it is, and if it's embedded in system critical applications that you can't interrupt and that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly right.
So we could think about, what are some of the typical applications for a ruggedized I/O connector? There are a lot of outdoor applications such as agriculture, and we actually have connectors that are used for certain customers in these kinds of environments. There's also various different kinds of stationary outdoor equipment such as solar arrays, batteries, HVAC equipment. There's a lot of different consumer and commercial products that would have interconnects on them where there has to be, data upload or download or power or things like that that are going to be subject to all kinds of things. So you can see rain there. There's going to be, a lot of different potential challenging environments for these kinds of applications. And then there are a lot of different handheld devices. There's GPS equipment, handheld radios, walkie-talkies, mobile laptops, GPS devices, things like that. It could be used indoors or outdoors, but these things are going to get dropped. They're going to get, dropped into a puddle or a lake or something like that. And you need to make sure that the equipment's going to survive that. So outdoor applications are a big user for ruggedized connectors. And then there are a lot of different indoor industrial applications as well. Some of those are listed here, but there's obviously a lot more than are shown. This is really just representative, but there are a lot of different kinds of robots that are used in factory automation, warehouse automation. These can involve connections to sensors, devices called actuators or valves. These are the actual little components that perform work in the robots. Various different kinds of hand tools. They can be subject to a lot of different kinds of abuse and environments, and various different types of controls as well. You might think of this as kind of an office environment, but really you're in a factory here, or you're in some types of controls for transportation systems or things like that. But these are situations where you still have a high cost of reliability or a high demand for reliability in applications like these. So ruggedized connectors are very useful here.
This slide is a good example of why ruggedized I/O connectors have become so important in factories in recent years. You got these massive increases in automation, data collection, and transmission means a lot more connectors and more demanding requirements even.
Absolutely. And we're seeing that as one of the fastest growing markets that we're involved in. Actually, there are a lot of other developments that are going on in factories as well, with different types of connectors for higher data transmission speeds, and fully automated Ethernet network driven factories as well. And all of that is leading the proliferation of high speed connectors that also need to be rugged.
So what are some other application examples?
A really important one to us is LED lighting. So there are a lot of different kinds of lighting that people see out and about that they don't really think about in terms of how they do that. Things like architectural lighting, horticulture lighting. So this is where you would have grow lights inside vertical farming buildings that could have high levels of humidity. Street lights. So every street light that you see out there typically is going to have some sort of a sensor on it. And those sensors have become more and more sophisticated, going from simple photocell that turn a light on when it gets dark out to turning it off when it brightens up again, to having a lot of other different kinds of functions. These can be communication nodes with other streetlights, or actually control networks. And they can be other types of sensors that sense the presence of people or vehicles that will either turn on or brighten the light, that kind of thing. And these are obviously outdoors, so they need to be ruggedized and sealed, etc. And then indoor lighting. So there are a lot of different kinds of LED indoor lighting, but all of them rely on sensor controls, and could be environments where you need to have some sealing as well, or some protection against moisture. So there are a lot of different kinds of LED lighting applications that will make use of ruggedized connectors because of the environments that they're in and because of the reliability that's required. Again, these can be not just lighting, but they can be communications and sensor driven, which is clearly going to be a high reliability type of an application.
And getting back to some of our earlier discussion, all of these applications you show here, the cost of repair, replacement, and maintenance would be pretty extreme.
It can be, absolutely, especially when you're looking at architectural lighting or street lighting. You've got to send a crew out. They've got to get up to that fixture. They've got to replace a connector in there, or a module of some sort. And the cost to service these can be very high. Another important application for ruggedized connectors are healthcare applications. We have connectors that are used in all of these different types of applications you're seeing here, from defibrillators, portable patient monitors, MRI machines, all kinds of different robotics that are used, ultrasound equipment. In many cases, hospitals are now sending people home in a condition where they're not fully recovered yet, and they need to take some equipment home with them. And that's typically the kind of application you'd see something like a portable patient monitor in. Now, it's out of your control when it's out of the hospital. Somebody might drop this in a bathtub, or knock it over in their bedroom or something like that. So they need to be ruggedized, and there's a lot of different interconnects on these, as you can see, and they've got to provide protection to that equipment. It's expensive equipment, so it's very worthwhile to protect it. And in applications like robotic surgery and other surgical suite types of equipment, again, you've got to have interconnect devices that are going to provide protection against, any kind of the different, hazards and environmental issues I talked about previously, fluid incursion, shock, vibration, that kind of thing. And they have to be ultra reliable. MRI machines in particular, these make use of filtered connectors, extremely important because the data that's being driven with these machines is highly sensitive, and it needs to be very protected from any kind of electromagnetic interference. And then there are military applications. We've been supplying ruggedized products into military applications for quite a number of years, and these typically encompass all of the harsh environments that you could think of. So you've got EMI, you've got shock, vibration, impact situations, you have moisture incursion situations, so things like the radios, any kind of portable electrical equipment, and communications devices, ruggedized laptops, tablets. They all need to be protected, and especially in today's military environment, which is becoming so much more connected, and high reliability is vital.
So, Peter, we've covered harsh environments and associated applications. Can you help me and our engineering audience help us out by teaching us about the different types of Amphenol ruggedized connectors that we should be considering in our designs?
Sure. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. If we take a look at what people think of as typical ruggedized connectors, there's an array of different ones that are shown here, but very often they are going to be a standard connector, like a modular jack and a plug, or a USB connector that's been embedded in this a big circular connector that no doubt provides extremely good mechanical protection and sealing where it's designed to do that. But in many cases, it's overkill. It's big and bulky, is very, very expensive, and it's not something that's going to be really conducive to miniaturized equipment, or where you need to have a lot of ports on a piece of equipment, for instance. So while there's definitely still applications for these types of products, we have introduced a number of different connectors that emulate the performance of these, but in a more conventional type of a package, where you're maintaining the form factor of the original connector, the non-protected version of it, and it's still providing that very, very high level of performance and protection. One of the key things about these is that these have metal die-cast housings typically. They're sealed to IP67 requirements and higher throughout. They basically have panel gaskets on them, so when you mount it to a panel, you're protecting not only ingress of fluids and dust through the connector itself, but around the mating area of the connector. There's multiple different interfaces available, multiple mounting styles, multiple terminations, and they're 100% mateable to standard plugs. So these can take the place of some of those connectors where a standard connector has been adapted into a big, bulky, circular latching type of device. It's being replaced by a connector that's much more like the original form factor. And that's actually one of the things I want to demonstrate here, is that, as it says, size matters. So in situations where you've got perhaps a device that's got a standard connector mounted on it, and you can see the standard equivalents here, but it needs to be replaced with something that's going to provide that level of protection that the equipment needs. We've got solutions that will emulate the size and the form factor of the non-protected version, or the non-rugged version. That's going to come very, very close and make it much, much easier for designers to incorporate these into their designs.
That makes a lot of sense, to have something that is more form, fit, and function compatible if you're going to have to retrofit or making it just a ruggedized version of the same product, without having to make massive changes by going to those big, bulky circular connectors you showed earlier.
That was one of the driving factors for us developing these lines of connectors. We had customers coming to us where they're using standard connectors, interfaces, so modular jacks or RJs, D-subs, USB connectors, HDMI connectors, and they couldn't find any way to make these things protected in their applications. They were, quite often they would be putting silicone sealing on the inside, gooping it around, which of course might provide you some level of protection, but it's going to be messy, and it's not going to be 100% effective, and it's not going to be consistent either. So we developed this line of ruggedized variants of standard connectors to fill that role, and they've proven extremely popular throughout all of the industries and the applications that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense because I think everybody in our audience can relate to a USB connector, for example, that has failed.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. So, in addition to the connectors that are replacing the non-ruggedized versions for these standard interfaces, one of the things we have recognized is that because these will mate with standard plugs and cable assemblies out there, which are not sealed, the mating interface itself on this, in other words, between the two connectors, is not sealed. It's protecting the equipment, but the mating interface is not sealed. So that has driven us to develop some products that actually will provide that sealing as well. This is an accessory that can be provided, and basically it's a sealing boot that can be applied to modular jacks, USB connectors, HDMIs, other interfaces like that, that can be used on a standard cable assembly and then applied to our existing harsh environment connectors. And it's assembled in this way, it's providing 100% sealed connection right throughout. So the mating interface is sealed. It's easy to mate and unmate, and it's not going to allow anything to get into the mating area or into the equipment either. And then there's a range of different other kinds of protective accessories that we've got as well. Other, sealing boots that help protect against dust and provide some cable protection as well, and a variety of different sealing caps that a lot of our connectors actually come with, depending on the variant that you want, or they can be purchased separately.
So can these boots be applied after the fact? Like I've already got my USB cable, like your example here, and I can purchase a boot and apply it to that existing cable?
Yes, you can. Absolutely. That's exactly what it's designed to do. So you've got a standard, IP20 cable that you're already using. You need to protect that interface. If you buy the boot, it's stretchy enough, silicone, that you would just pull it on over the connector. It will stretch around that. There's a grommet and a cable tie that go on the cable end of it. You zip tie that on and tighten it up. That provides a sealed protection for the cable entry. And then at the mating side, there is a flange that's molded into the silicone rubber boot itself, and then there's a hard component as well that houses the thumb screws, and when they are engaged with the connector housing and screwed down and tightened, it completely seals that interface. Another big advantage of these is that they're, as you can see, it's sort of an accordion design. So that allows you to mate or unmate the connector without having to remove those thumb screws. And that's really useful in outdoor applications where a serviceman might need to unmate the connector and then remate it for one reason or another. He doesn't have to undo all of this sealing. It'll just stretch and allow him to unmate it and then mate it back together without changing anything.
Wow, it's a fascinating solution.
It's very popular. A lot of people will buy this for exactly those reasons. So there are a number of other different types of sealing connectors as in addition to the standard products that I've mentioned. And there's a couple I'd like to touch on here. One of those is our FLH series. And this is a range of miniature latching connectors that provide IP67 sealing. These are very small. And they're available in 3-position or 6-position housings, and it allows you to have a number of different contact configurations as well. Provides positive latching with a positive click, so you can tell that it's latched. There's sealing members on both the mating side and on the wire entry side, and they will provide up to 7 amps of current when you're using 18 gauge wire. There's also different types of termination capabilities available. They can be either used with a crimp contact, which is then inserted into the back of the connector, or they're available with what are called poke-in terminations, where there's a contact in the connector already, and you just strip your wire and stick it in the back of the connector, and it's terminated and sealed all in one operation. We also have PCB mount versions of these as well that provide panel mounting and sealing also. So these are finding uses in a lot of different indoor and outdoor applications where you've got needs for power and signal and lighting applications. I had mentioned indoor lighting, for instance, before, but also architectural lighting. Any applications where you've got to make that connection from LED driver out to the actual chip on board array or to sensors, things like that. But it's in a a device that is going to be subject to water or moisture or humidity or something like that, and you want to protect it. And the latching makes it very, very easy to service. The customer doesn't have to undo any wiring or anything. They can just depress the latch and pull it out. And we sell these as individual components, connectors, as well as pre-made cable assemblies for customers' use. We've got other versions that are made for cable assemblies as opposed to individual discrete wires. And this is our MRD series. It's a circular, again, thumb latching type of connector. Highly ruggedized. You could drive a truck over these. You're not going to damage them. These have a metal latch that provides an audible click, which is important for applications where customers can't necessarily see what they're doing. It could be in a very tight environment, or they have to reach under something to make the connection. When they can hear that click, they know that it's properly mated. And there's no coupling ring you have to turn or anything like that to unmate them. It's a simple thumb latch you depress and allows you to easily unmate it. There are many different shell sizes available for these. There are a lot of configuration options. They're plastic or metal shells, a variety of different contact arrangements, so anywhere from 2 up to 9 contacts. And they're fully IP67 sealed. Solder termination, so a very, very robust type of a termination. They are available with integrated dust caps. Easy to install in the field. And again, we offer these as individual connectors, as full cable assemblies to whatever the customer's specification is.
Peter, I noticed that a lot of the connectors are round in these rugged applications. So for someone designing a new system, is there a reason they might choose a circular connector versus the rectangular connectors of that previous slide? What are the kind of relative advantages of each?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of people are very familiar with round connectors, and it might be as simple as in previous versions of their products, they have had round connectors, and this will fit into existing, mating configurations and mounting configurations. But a lot of these are used for inline connections as well. So when you've got a round connector, you've got a more uniform profile to it, and that's very, very handy in situations where the connector is going to be exposed outside. You don't have a lot of edges and things like that to catch on other equipment. It's a very uniform type of a structure. Where you would see a good advantage for a rectangular connector in the FLH series that I mentioned, a lot of these are used inside equipment, but where the equipment itself is not sealed, and you need to make sure you're protecting that interconnect. So the form factor of it is a little bit more conducive to internal applications. And if you think of things like appliances, for instance, something as simple as a coffee maker or a washing machine, where you could get moisture or liquids spraying the inside of the equipment. If something fails, you've got a small connection here that's providing power and signal to some of the various different components inside that equipment. That connector is really, really useful for that, and it's miniature as well. When you get into circular connectors like this one, they do get a little bit bigger, but they're adding more bulk. They're very, very mechanically strong and as I said, ruggedized. So in comparison to the rectangular ones, where they're not as mechanically bulky, they're more miniature for use inside equipment, where you might have limited space available to you, but it still provides the sealing.
So we've been talking about some of your off-the-shelf things. What about custom requirements? Does Amphenol work with customers to create custom solutions?
That's one of our strengths, actually, the things that we really find is useful to customers, their flexibility and ability to work with them on custom applications. Some of these can be taking things like our ruggedized modular jack connector and building it into a multi-position housing. This can save space for the customer. It makes it unique to their specific application. And it basically is a space saving and process cost saving measure. When you only have to handle one component as opposed to 4 different components in a case like this, it makes your processing costs lower, and it's taking up less panel space as well. Other types of customization features are where we can add multiple different types of terminations on the back of a connector. So this is an example of what we call an interposer, where you've got a connector with a PC board mounted to it, and then in this case, a terminal block on the other end. So that would be on the inside of your equipment. That terminal block can be replaced with another connector. It can be also just a PC board with plated through holes for direct wiring. So it provides a lot of flexibility. And that allows us to customize the product very easily for the customer as well. We've also done applications where we will provide customized housings. This is a picture of our IX industrial plug, which is an industrial Ethernet connector. And while the housing on that is already the standard housing, which has two thumb latches on it, basically, is already ruggedized. An application like this provides you more positive latching where you actually have to undo the thumb screws in order to unmate the connector. And then we do things like overmolds and cable direction, cable management designs that will be suited to a customer's specific application. And there are multiple other types of customization that can be done as well. Specific features being added to a connector, shield tabs, things like that, different LED combinations. So there's a lot of flexibility that can be built in. And then we can take a look at some other products that have specialized features. Actually, here's a good example of the interposers I was talking about. One that I want to focus on here is the one in the foreground. You can see you've got a ruggedized USB connector mounted to a panel. And then on the other end of the interposer board, you've got a USB connector, but it's got a latch on it. That's something that nobody else out there has. It's an IP20 USB connector, but it's latching. So when you plug in a USB plug, the latches on the clip mechanism on a receptacle interface with the two little rectangular holes that are on the top of every USB type A plug. And you have to lift that latch up before you're able to unmate it. So that's very, very useful in applications where you don't want to accidentally pull the USB plug out of the receptacle. And that's extremely useful in medical applications and in military applications. And then there are some other variants where we've created sealing boots like this one. It's a hard plastic boot, but it provides very ruggedized cable sealing and a sealing member that goes up against the panel. And this can be used with non-ruggedized connectors. So providing a ruggedized accessory for a non-rugged connector. And then there are things like USB connectors here or HDMI connectors where you've got specialized mating and latching. In this case, it's got a flange with a screw mount on it. And we've also introduced some RJ industrial plugs as well, which are a ruggedized version of a modular plug for use in industrial environments. And you can see this has got die-cast housing and a lot of elements in it that make this much more ruggedized than a standard modular plug, which is usually all plastic and has a plastic latch, which I think everybody has seen one of those with those latches broken off. So this is another good example of a value-added feature that we can provide.
Yeah, and as you were talking about these, just these standard formats, the data rates get higher. So the electrical connection there is really important. As that starts to degrade because you're maybe pulling out, you maybe haven't lost connection, but you've degraded the quality of the connection. Then your signal integrity goes down. So it can be above and beyond just breaking these connections, but making them quality connections.
Signal integrity and data reliability is paramount in so many applications now. So these connectors are designed to maintain that. If the connector gets jarred, the mated pair, I should say, if they get sort of jarred, et cetera, you're going to maintain a good connection with no what we call momentary discontinuities. And when these connectors are qualified, they go through shock and vibration testing with a mated pair to make sure that you don't have any discontinuities, which can be microseconds long. If you get contacts bouncing against each other momentarily becoming unmated, and situations like that could cause data interruption or cause a process to shut down, that kind of thing. So we qualify and test all of these connectors to make sure that that's not going to happen. They're high reliability interfaces. To wrap it up, I'd just like to show you, one of the images from our website, which shows the range of different ruggedized connectors that are available. So on here, you can see the modular jacks, the HDMI connectors, D-sub USB connectors that I've referred to, as well as the MRD and the FLH connectors, and some of the various different sealing boots and accessories that are available. I would really like to encourage people to visit this resource, and they can learn a lot more about these connectors. And virtually all this information is available directly through the Mouser website as well.
All right, Peter, where should listeners go if they want additional information then?
Our product manager for this is a gentleman named Nadeem Khan, and his email address is there. You can also visit our Rugged Solutions landing page on our website at amphenol-cs.com. and take you to a direct link to the various different data sheets and drawings, models that are available for download, and as well as our tech chat team that will be able to give you quick answers.
Peter, this has been a really great education for me and I think for our audience on rugged interconnects for harsh environments. Thank you for joining me on Tech Chat today.
It's my pleasure, Dale. Thanks for having me.
If you are interested in getting your hands on some of these rugged interconnect products from Amphenol Communication Solutions, please go visit our friends at Mouser Electronics, our sponsor for today's Tech Chat. And please join us again next time on Tech Chat, where we chat with the leading technical experts like Peter Swift from industry-leading companies like Amphenol Communication Solutions, who are changing our world every day.